I think most people would say my life is a good one. Quiet, simple. Small town. Keep to myself. I have a little house in a quiet neighborhood, a job at the library that doesn't require too much of me. People wave when they see me smile. They think they know me. They don't. But the truth is, there's a whole other world I live in, one that only the four walls of our house have ever witnessed. And in that world, I'm not a quiet woman. I'm a scared one. My name is Lena and Marcus is my husband. He's the kind of man who can charm a room full of strangers and make them believe he's the best thing that ever happened to them. People think he's perfect. Successful, wealthy, respected. The kind of guy who always knows just what to say. But there's a side to him that no one sees. I've seen it too many times. The rage, the fists, the coldness in his eyes when he's had too much to drink. And when he's sober, the words that feel like a knife in my gut. You're worthless. You'll never make it without me. Look at you, pathetic. The first time he hit me, I was in shock. I remember thinking, this isn't real. This can't be happening. But it did. And every time since, I just learned how to survive it. To swallow the pain, to keep quiet. I learned how to pretend. For him, for Maya, for anyone who might ask. I'm a good wife. A good mother. That's what I tell myself. But none of it's true. Maya, my sweet little girl, she's 7 now. She's starting to notice things. The way I flinch when Marcus raises his hand. The way he speaks to me. The way I freeze when he's angry. She's old enough now to see things. To know something isn't right. I can see it in her eyes when she looks at me. He's worried. She doesn't say anything, not yet. But I can feel her asking the questions. Why is mommy sad all the time? Why is daddy always yelling? That's why I've been planning. Quietly. Hiding cash in the back of the drawer. Slowly, over weeks, months. Collecting little things. Phone numbers, papers, documents I might need one day. A new identity if it comes to that. Becca, my old friend from college, reached out to me a few months ago. She told me I could come stay with her if I ever needed to. I didn't think I'd ever need it, at least not this soon. But I can't stay here any longer. I can't let Maya grow up in this house thinking that this is what love looks like. I told myself I'd leave when I had everything set up. When I had enough money, when I could get Maya and me out of here without him noticing. But tonight everything changed. Marcus came home drunk. I could hear him before I saw him. The slurred speech, the way he banged around the kitchen knocking things over. I told Maya to stay in her room and locked the door. He knows the routine by now. Hide. Be quiet. He didn't come to find me right away. He never does, not at first. But the rage is there, bubbling under the surface. I can feel it in the air. And I know it's just a matter of time before he decides he wants to break something. Me. The furniture. Anything. Then the shouting starts. His voice rips through the silence like glass breaking. You think I don't know what you're doing? You think I don't see you sneaking around behind my back? I'm standing there frozen. I can't even bring myself to speak. My heart's racing. The fear is back. Never really leaves. But something inside me shifts. For the first time in years, I know what I have to do. I grab Maya. We don't say a word. I take her hand and we slip out the back door. The rain's pouring down, but it doesn't matter. We're not looking back. Not now. We run through the yard, across the street and into the woods. I've never run so fast in my life. Every step is a promise. No more. No more fear. No more pain. I get us to the car. The engine hums to life and for a moment I feel like I'm breathing again. We pull out of the driveway, the headlights slicing through the rain. I glance in the rearview mirror and then I see it. Fire. Flames licking up from the roof of the house. I can't breathe. I can't process it. But I don't stop. I don't turn back. I don't know how the fire started. I don't know if it was me, or if it was him setting the match to everything. But I do know one thing. He's still inside. And for the first time in my life I don't care. I look at Maya, her wide eyes reflecting the red glow of the flames. I squeeze her hand. And I keep driving. The first time I tried to make a phone call, my hands were shaking so badly, I had to hold the phone with both hands just to get it steady. My fingers didn't want to work right. The number I was dialing seemed to echo in my head like a strange rhythm I couldn't escape. I wasn't sure what to do. I wasn't sure what to feel. All I knew was that I couldn't go back to that house. I couldn't go near it. I'd gotten away. But the fire, the heat I'd seen in the rearview mirror. It didn't feel real. It felt like a nightmare. Like something I couldn't wake up from. I called Becca. She was still awake. Her voice was full of concern when I explained that something had happened. That Marcus, he was dead and our house was gone. I didn't tell her everything. How I'd left. How I'd taken Maya and just disappeared into the night. I didn't tell her that part, not then. I couldn't. I told her I was scared. That I didn't know what to do. I'll help you, Lena, she said, calm. You're safe. Stay where you are. I'll come to get you. I didn't argue. I couldn't argue. So I waited. And waited. And waited. The next morning the phone rang. I knew it was the police. It had to be. I didn't answer. I couldn't. There were rumors already. I knew they were talking about me. The wife snapped, they said on the news. The abuse finally broke her. She killed him. I wasn't watching the news. I couldn't. But the whispers were there everywhere. At the grocery store, the bank, everywhere I went. People knew. They knew what had happened. They just didn't know the truth. The next few hours passed in a haze. At some point I must have slept because when I woke up I was sitting on Becca's couch, a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, Maya curled up beside me, still asleep. The knock on the door was hard and fast like a hammer against glass. I didn't answer it at first. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for this. Lena Morgan, open up. We know you're in there. I froze. The voice came from the other side of the door. Authoritative. The sound of it sent a chill down my spine. When I finally opened the door, there were two of them. One of them was a tall man, clean-shaven, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. His partner was shorter, with a mustache that twitched when he spoke. Ma'am, we need to ask you some questions, the tall one said. His voice was flat, almost too calm. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking over my shoulder at Maya. Is she okay? He asked, but I could tell it wasn't a question out of concern. She's fine, I said. She's with me. She's safe. They didn't care about that. They didn't care about Maya or what we'd been through. They just cared about the fire, the body, the damage. And they were there to question me about it. They asked about the night, what had happened. They told me Marcus was dead. No surprise there, but the way they said it made it sound like I was the one who'd killed him. Do you know how the fire started? The shorter one asked. Were you involved? I could hear the accusation even if they hadn't said it outright. No, I answered quickly. I didn't start the fire. I don't even know how it started. I didn't know what else to say. I didn't even know where to start. They didn't believe me. I could see it in their eyes. They didn't care about the past. They didn't care that Marcus had been violent, had hurt me, had made our lives unbearable. To them I was just a widow. A grieving wife who finally broke. But then they pulled out the evidence. The gas can. Sitting just a few feet from the house. It wasn't like I'd been the one to set it down, but my fingerprints were all over it. That's when everything changed. I was no longer just a woman with a tragic story. I was a suspect. The gas can was the proof they needed. The pieces started falling into place. The media exploded. The whispers turned into shouts. She did it. She killed him. She got what she deserved. They didn't care that I'd been the victim for years. The abuse didn't matter. They saw a woman who'd finally snapped, who'd used the fire to erase her past. When Becca hired Jonah Wells, I wasn't sure if I should be relieved or scared. He was tough, a defense lawyer with a reputation for winning, but he had a look about him that made me uneasy. Skeptical. As if he didn't believe me, not at first. I've dealt with cases like this before, Jonah told me the first time we spoke. Wives who've had enough, wives who've killed their husbands. The system doesn't like to hear the word abuse when it comes to murder. They just see a dead man. I wanted to tell him everything. To explain how Marcus had been a monster, how he'd tortured me, how he'd hurt Maya. I wanted to make him see me, to make him understand that I was telling the truth. But I could see it in his eyes. He was working out the case in his head, running through the evidence, figuring out what was missing. The timeline was all wrong. I had left the house hours before the fire started. The arson investigators' report made it clear the gas had been spread around the garage. But I wasn't anywhere near the garage when the fire began. Still, they kept me in a holding cell overnight, held me in front of the judge the next morning. I didn't fight it. I couldn't. The evidence was against me. And the more I tried to explain myself, the more it seemed like I was digging my own grave. I was a widow, yes. But I was also a suspect. And the world was more than willing to believe the worst about me. The courtroom was cold, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones and refused to leave. I sat in the back, my hands folded tightly in my lap, trying not to think about the eyes on me. The whispers were back, swirling around just like they had after the fire. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had decided what happened. The D didn't waste any time. As soon as the proceedings started, he painted a cold, calculated picture of me. A woman who had finally had enough, who'd snapped. The defendant, Lena Morgan, he said, his voice crisp and harsh, murdered her husband, Marcus Morgan. She set the fire. She fled the scene, thinking she could get away with it. I barely heard the rest. It was as if the words hit me like a physical blow. Murderer. The label burned in my mind. They had already decided what happened, and no amount of truth was going to change that. Jonah, my lawyer, sat next to me, his hand briefly brushing mine, a silent gesture of support. He had been preparing me for this, how it was going to feel, how it was going to look. But nothing could have prepared me for the weight of it all, the eyes of the jury, the whispers that followed me like a cloud of smoke. The DA went on, outlining the evidence against me. My fingerprints on the gas can, the fact that I was seen leaving the house that night. He painted the timeline and it seemed airtight. He made it sound like I had planned it all. That I'd been waiting for the right moment to kill Marcus. Like I was some kind of monster. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and tell them everything. About the years of abuse. About the fear, the constant tension in our home. I wanted to explain that I didn't set that fire. But all I could do was sit there in silence, my heart pounding, hoping Jonah would find a way to get through this. Jonah didn't give up. He didn't believe the DA's version. He had too much experience to let a case like mine slip through the cracks. As soon as the trial adjourned for the day, he dove into the investigation, determined to find something, anything to clear my name. He started by looking at Marcus's finances. And that's when the first crack in the DA's case appeared. Marcus had been $200,000 in debt. Not only that, but his business was under federal investigation for fraud. He had enemies, real ones, people who would have been more than happy to see him gone. Jonah dug deeper. The more he uncovered, the more it became clear that Marcus had been living a double life. The charming businessman everyone knew? That wasn't the whole story. The real Marcus was buried under layers of secrets, lies, and shady deals. Jonah uncovered a trail of creditors, angry investors, and even a few threats that had been made against Marcus's life. It made me sick to my stomach to think about. How could I have been so blind to all of it? How had I stayed with him all those years? I tried not to dwell on it, though. I couldn't. I had to keep moving forward. For Maya. It was Maya's drawings that brought me to my knees. We were sitting in the small living room of Becca's house, her crayons scattered across the table. Maya was quiet, her little fingers tracing shapes on the paper as she looked up at me. "What's this, sweetheart?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. She pushed a drawing toward me. It was of a house. A house that looked like our old one, the one that was now nothing but ash. In the corner there was a figure, tall, dark, with something red in their hand. Fire. I blinked at it, my heart thumping in my chest. "Where did you see this, Maya?" I asked, my voice trembling. She bit her lip. "Daddy was yelling, Mommy. He was yelling and I was scared. He said we were going to lose everything. And then he said someone was coming to help." I froze. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Someone was coming to help? What did that mean? I didn't ask any more questions. I didn't want to scare her, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. The fire, the debts, the people Marcus had angered. It was all starting to make sense. I had to tell Jonah. I had to make him see this. The next day Jonah and I met at the courthouse and I handed him the drawings. His face was unreadable as he looked at them. "This changes things," he said quietly. "I'm going to talk to the neighbor who lives across the street from you. They said they saw something unusual the night of the fire. Maybe this will tie into the mystery car we found on the surveillance footage." "Do you think it's enough?" I asked, my voice shaking. "It's a start," Jonah said. He squeezed my hand before walking away. I couldn't breathe. The DA had painted me as the villain, the one who'd set the fire. But what if the real killer wasn't me? What if it was someone else? What if they were trying to cover their tracks by framing me? I had no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in this nightmare I felt like there might be a chance, just a chance, that the truth would come out. That evening Jonah returned with new information. The neighbor had seen someone near the garage the night of the fire. A man who was tall, wearing a dark coat. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but after hearing about Marcus's debts and the fire, he remembered the figure. And that wasn't all. The mystery car from the surveillance footage? It was registered to Eli Bowers, Marcus's former business partner. Jonah's voice was steady when he told me, "Lena, I think we've found our lead." I felt the weight of those words sink into me. Finally, after all this time, it seemed like the truth was beginning to make its way to the surface. But there was still a long way to go. And with the trial looming over us, I wasn't sure what would happen next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a small spark of hope. I don't know when the weight on my chest started to lift. Maybe it was when Jonah gave me that piece of paper, the gas receipt that placed someone else at the scene of the fire. Or maybe it was when I finally started to understand the truth, the whole truth about Marcus and the world he'd built around us. Either way, I felt a little lighter. Just a little. Jonah had been working tirelessly to track down every lead, no matter how small. He hadn't stopped. Every conversation he had, every document he reviewed, every detail he uncovered, it all brought us closer to one undeniable conclusion. Marcus had more enemies than I'd ever realized. A lot more. The first person Jonah dug into was Eli Bowers, Marcus's former business partner, disgraced and now living in a rundown apartment on the other side of town. Eli had lost everything in a shady deal, one of the many Marcus had been involved in. His career, his reputation, his money, all gone. It didn't take long for Jonah to find him. The man was a shell of who he'd once been. When Jonah showed up at his door, Eli didn't even hesitate to answer. I couldn't blame him. When someone comes knocking with a case involving a death that could clear your name, you don't waste time. I wasn't there for the conversation, but Jonah told me everything. Eli admitted it eventually. He'd gone to confront Marcus that night. The fire had started soon after. But Eli didn't start it. He'd been drunk. Violent. Eli said Marcus had been yelling at him about the money he owed, about the bad deals, about everything falling apart. And when Eli tried to argue back, Marcus went off on him, screaming that he was the one who'd ruined everything. The same way he'd ruined me, he'd ruined Eli. "I didn't mean for it to happen," Eli said, his voice trembling when Jonah told me about it. "I was angry. I was so damn angry. But I didn't start the fire. I couldn't do that." Eli didn't stick around to find out what happened. The chaos, the fire starting, it was too much for him to handle. He ran. And that was the last anyone had seen of him until Jonah found him. I didn't feel sorry for Eli. He was a part of Marcus's world. But I did feel something for him. For the first time, I understood that his life had been a casualty of Marcus's greed too. The next step was the arson investigator. The report had already said the fire had started in the garage. But something still didn't sit right with Jonah. He asked the investigator to go back to the scene and re-examine everything. Jonah wanted to make sure the evidence was clear, that it pointed to the right person. The investigator confirmed what Jonah suspected. The fire had started in the garage, not the kitchen where I'd been. It made all the difference. The kitchen had been where I'd tried to escape, where I'd grabbed Maya before running out the back. If the fire had started in the kitchen, the entire case would have fallen apart. But it hadn't. This changed everything. Jonah didn't stop there. He pushed forward, diving deeper into the financials, into Marcus's shady dealings. The more he uncovered, the more it became clear that Marcus owed money to some dangerous people. People who didn't care about the law, who didn't care about the fire or about any of the things that were happening to me. And then Jonah found something else. Something that turned the case on its head. A gas receipt. It was time-stamped hours after I had already left with Maya. The gas station was a few miles away from our house, and the receipt was clear. Someone had bought gasoline at that exact time. It wasn't me. It wasn't anyone I knew. It was someone else entirely. The twist I hadn't been expecting came hard and fast. Marcus hadn't just been hiding from me. He'd been hiding from a lot of people. Dangerous people. People who were willing to burn everything down. Not just a house but a life. Jonah said nothing as he handed me the receipt. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the way he processed the new information. I didn't ask him anything. I just sat there letting the shock wash over me. The fire hadn't been my fault. I hadn't started it. But someone had. And now we had proof. Whoever had bought the gasoline that night had been close to the house. Close enough to have known about Marcus's debts. Close enough to have known exactly how to set everything up to make it look like I was the one who'd done it. I didn't sleep that night. There was too much to process. Too many questions. I could feel the walls closing in around me, but there was a new sense of clarity too. The fire was no longer a symbol of my fear. It was a symbol of something else. A terrible, deadly game that Marcus had been playing for years. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I knew this case was far from finished. There were still people out there, people who wanted Marcus gone, and I was still tangled up in the web of lies and deceit that had been spun around me. But with the gas receipt, with Eli's confession, and with the re-examination of the fire's origins, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. It's a strange thing to wake up free. 4 days I had been held in the grip of uncertainty. One foot in a cell, the other in a courtroom, waiting for someone to tell me what my future held. I never imagined freedom would feel so empty. When the D finally dropped the charges against me, I couldn't believe it. The evidence had spoken. They had no case anymore. No way to tie me to the fire. No way to tie me to Marcus's death. I hadn't expected them to apologize. The press conference was quiet. No fanfare, no regret. Just a few words from the DA, who explained how the case had been re-evaluated, how the real evidence had surfaced, and how they were no longer pursuing charges against me. There was no apology. Just the cold, dry words of a man who had lost his case, trying to save face. I didn't care about that. What mattered was that I was free. At least in the eyes of the law. But in the eyes of the world, it was a different story. The moment I stepped out of that courtroom, I could feel the weight of the world on my shoulders. It wasn't over. Not really. They didn't see me as innocent. They saw me as someone who had gotten away with it. There were whispers, stares, rumors that swirled around me like smoke. I was a widow who had been accused of murder, a woman who'd been through hell and come out the other side. But people didn't know what I'd been through. They didn't understand the years of terror, the constant fear, the lies that had been wrapped around me like chains. They didn't see Marcus for what he really was. To them, I was just another woman who'd killed her husband, who'd escaped the consequences. I couldn't change their minds. I wasn't going to try. So I did what I had to do. I packed up with Maya and left. We moved to a new city, far away from the whispers and the stares. A place where no one knew our names. Maya started therapy. She was so small, so young, and yet she had already seen too much. I didn't know if the therapy would help her, but I had to try. I had to give her the chance to heal, to find a piece of peace in this world. As for me, I started writing. Not with my real name. I couldn't risk that. But I wrote about my story, about the years I had spent with Marcus, about what it was like to survive in a world that constantly tried to break you. I wrote for the women who had no voice, for the ones who had been silenced, for the ones who had survived in the shadows. I wrote anonymously, knowing that my words might one day reach someone who needed to hear them. In the quiet, in the stillness of the mornings and evenings, I found myself thinking of Marcus. I didn't know what I expected. Some kind of closure, maybe some kind of peace that would come with facing the past. But it didn't work like that. The day I went to Marcus's grave, I didn't have any words. I didn't have any anger, any sorrow, not even the bitterness I thought I would feel. I just stood there in front of the cold stone, looking at the name I had once tried to make my own. He was gone. And in the end, I was the one who had survived. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The silence was enough. It was my freedom, my truth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. His last act was cruelty. Hers survival. And that was enough. Thank you for following Lena's journey through her difficult time. If her story touched you in any way, please share it with others who might need a reminder of resilience. And if you're ready to start your own journey toward healing, take a step, because survival is always worth it.